Well, good morning again to all of you, and greetings in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. And for all of you who watch this online as a recording later, welcome to all of you as well. My name is David, and it's my honor to bring to you today's teaching. And it was really nice of you all to segregate on one side of the sanctuary. I can kind of scoot over a little bit. I don't have to look back and forth as much, so thank you for that. This morning, as you can tell, we will be continuing on our sermon series through the book of Acts. We're going to be doing that till Advent starts. I'll probably come back to the book of Acts unless God does an amazing miracle. We're not going to make it to the end of chapter 28, the end of the book, until in the next few weeks. It could happen, but I highly doubt it. But we'll come back to it as well. So today, as you can tell, we are in Acts chapter 12. That's where we'll be this morning. As most of you know, a few months ago, it's been over 2 months now, which means we're officially in November, that Pastor Janie moved to South Dakota, to Rapid City, and about 2 or 3 weeks after that, I had a meeting with the lead team, and we talked for a while, and I said, hey, here are some things we kind of have to readjust a little bit, but here are some things we can pray about, things specifically that are that I believe are possible steps of faith we could take. And at that time, there were 15 of them on the list, probably, or more. And at first we thought, well, maybe we should just take all these ideas and give them to the church and ask LifeBridge as a whole to pray for all these ideas. And said, okay, let's think about that. And then I paused a few days later and said, well, I'm not sure I'm ready to give them 15 ideas where 10 of them are probably something so far out of the box. We're not ready for those things. I don't think we're going to do those things. I said, let's narrow down our list of prayer requests, and then we can share them with our church. And so on each table, there are a few copies of some prayer. It says prayer for LifeBridge or LifeBridge prayer. If you need more, there are more on other tables as well. But there are a list of 6 things that really I believe that I would ask all of you to be in prayer for. Up in the corner, it says November and December 2025. And so those are the months I'm asking you to pray for these 6 things. So I don't want to take too much time this morning, but I want to briefly go over each one of those 6. Some of them are obvious, and some of them take a little bit of explanation. So let me just describe each one briefly to you this morning, and then we'll jump into Acts chapter 12. The first thing is life groups. We've been doing a lot of different life group things over the years, but really I've been praying about and asking and our leaders about and other things about how do we do life groups coming up in the early spring, late winter. There are options as far as meeting and really diving into Bible study, but there's also a desire to say, I have people who don't know Jesus. They're not comfortable on Sunday mornings. Can we add that into life groups once a month, or somehow have a space for them to come to my life group and just have a fun night once in a while? And so we're talking about and praying about what do life groups look like to where we can still dive into Scripture, still grow with each other, but also have a space in our homes where we can invite people who don't know Jesus as well. What does that look like? And so I invite you all to pray with me on that. How do we do that well? My hope is that by the beginning of February, we'll be able to launch into something, but really want to pray together on what that looks like and what we really need as a community and what people around us who don't know Jesus, what they need also. The second thing is for the well house. The well house specifically, Ken and Aaron and I met with our district superintendent. It was back in last month. It's already a month ago in October, specifically because we wanted to know the direction for the well house. We wanted to talk about the vision of the well house is almost completely being accomplished right now. They're amazing. We're busy at the well house, lots of people in and out, many people coming and getting not only their need for accommodations, but spiritual care, amazing things. And so we wanted to continue to pray for the well house. We just met with the executive committee and saying, what does it look like? People on the executive committee have been here for as long as we can remember. How do we continue to pray and say, what is our vision for the well house? We want to continue to pray for that as well. We'll talk more about that a little bit later in the service as well. The third thing is a regular time of prayer. Over the last couple of months, I've been burdened that we need to pray together more, together as a church. We do it on Sunday mornings at 9:15, but even another time. I don't know if it's on a weekday or a weeknight, or if it is a time where we do it virtually because we all can't be here, or together, or we've done a hybrid of both those things. But really, I've been burdened to pray together more, and I want to find a good space and a good structure for that. Not only to pray for each other, obviously, to pray for those we love and know, but especially as we're praying for people who are lost around us, who don't know Jesus, we want to do that together as well and say, hey, I have a burden for my friend, my neighbor. They're not seeing anywhere open Jesus. Can we pray together for this? I want to have a space we can do that also. The fourth thing, are probably different order on yours, but Gage East Apartments is one also. As a Church of the Nazarene, we often feel called to, quote, Nazarenes. We've talked about this many times, the rejected, the unwanted in our society. Many times it's the homeless or people who just, you give to them, but you're not going to accept anything back and say, hey, people in our society say, you have nothing for us, you're not an asset to our society. Well, recently, as the leadership team, I was talking to them about, we were talking about Gage East Apartments, which are down on 40th Street, within about 3 blocks or 4 blocks from my house. That is literally a place where low-income people live. Some of them were formerly homeless. We thought, in my mind, I thought those who are many times homeless or others live on the southeast part of town, and there literally is an apartment complex of people who we would probably label as Nazarenes, or they would say, yep, we're mostly rejected, unwanted, who live near us within 5 minutes of our local church. And so we decided as a lead team, should we pray about, do we need to engage these people in our sphere who are close to us geographically? And so we at least want to pray about it. We know we can't do all these things well. We want to say, where are you guiding us in this, Lord? The fourth thing is LEAP, continuing, like I mentioned earlier, to pray for LEAP participants, students, and the teachers. We currently have, from my knowledge, of all the teachers and all the students, we have one that follows Jesus. He's a student. I meet with him regularly, but continue to pray as we seek out how to have relationships with them well. In addition to that, I met with one of the teachers a couple weeks ago, and it's always an issue or a question, but especially this year for some reason, they've been questioning whether they can financially support LEAP after this school year. They aren't sure. We passed a referendum that was supposed to take care of that, and then the school district has had some financial difficulties with less students than they thought and less federal aid, and so they're questioning certain programs. And so the teachers are kind of distressed, thinking usually it's the students that need programs like this, they cost more. And so I told them, I said, can I ask our local church to pray for that? And they said, absolutely, especially for the participants who need these programs, will just drop out probably and not be able to finish high school. For the teachers, because they care about these students, and also for our local church. It's kind of a secondary thing, but as a local church, that's part of our budget, is the amount we receive from rent as well. So just praying for the whole situation, and especially for the participants who are part of the program, that God would provide for them, especially in their education. The last one on there, the sixth one, is called Immigrant Connection. As many of you know, up in St. Paul, Mosaic Christian Community has an immigration site. It's part of a national group that's called Immigrant Connection. They have a local site there that helps with legal services for all those who are in the area who are illegal immigrants. They say, hey, how can we help you? What's your next step to become a legal immigrant? And they have all these services. Well, recently they've reached out to us and to others around within an hour or two. They say, we want to partner with other local churches to make local branches of our site, not to make LifeBridge a immigration site, but say, hey, can we come a few times a year to Rochester, use your space, and meet with people here who need immigration services? They say, hey, can you also have there might be additional programs that you would do, whether that's ESL or something else, or welcoming them with another way, welcoming immigrants. And so I said, I don't know if we can do that or not, but we can pray about it and say, is this something that we want to use our space that way? And also that as a local church, we would embrace immigrants in that way and say, we love you. We want to help in whatever way we can to show you the love and grace and truth of God's grace as well. So that's another way they're inviting us to. And there's a few tangible steps we can take. One of those is just education of what they do. But I said, let's pray first and seek the Lord, because we can't do all these things really well. We don't have the resources or the bandwidth to do that, but we do want to say, Lord, where are you leading us? There are so many opportunities and people who need Jesus. We want to know where to start. So again, in the months of November and December, if you would pray about these things, you could take a card home, put it on your fridge if you want to, And then if any time you say, I think God is kind of moving in this way or speaking to me and saying, I wonder if we should consider this, please come and tell me about it. Talk to Ken or Aaron or Mark or Michelle or the leadership team or whoever else. Please let me know. We'd love to listen to God together. Okay, well, that's those are things we can keep in prayer. But let's transition now to Acts chapter 12 and talk about what God has for us specifically from the book of Acts. As many of you know, we've been going through the whole book of Acts. We've read almost or much of the book of Acts, but we did skip a short section. Last week we ended in Acts 11:18, and we're skipping to chapter 12. So we're going to refer to it later. So I want to just briefly let you know what happens in those 10 or so verses that we skipped this morning, so we kind of can get caught up in what's happening. At the very end of at the end of chapter 11, the gospel spreads to a city called Antioch. And you might have heard that city. Let's pull up a map, Ken, and I want to show you where Antioch is in relation to other cities. So you can go to the next slide there, Ken. Antioch is about 300 miles, almost directly north of Jerusalem. And at this part in the book of Acts, Antioch becomes kind of like a second Jerusalem, a second center of Christianity. Eventually, we're going to start seeing missionaries be sent out from Antioch. It's not just that Jerusalem is the center now, but as Jesus anticipated and commanded, the gospel is beginning to spread and it's multiply. And so Antioch is one of those centers. And just kind of like how we see in the United States is not the only, we're not the only Christian people sending missionaries. Now many countries are sending missionaries to us, to here as well. And that's what was happening. In chapter 11, there's a famine that's predicted, and those from Antioch and other places send aid to Jerusalem because they need it also. And so it's an amazing thing, and we'll talk about it more, where Antioch becomes very, very important in the church and becomes the gospel is spreading in those ways. And so I wanted to point that out because we'll talk more about this and we'll refer to it. So I want to kind of talk about why that is and what that means. So that's at least the beginning of it. Well, we get to chapter 12 now, and as we make it to chapter 12, we're still asking the same questions we've been asking, specifically those first followers of Jesus in the church and the book of Acts. What did they do as they followed Jesus? How can we learn from them, from their mistakes, and also from the amazing things God did through them? Today we're going to look at a situation that happened. We'll read more about it. We just read the beginning. We'll read more about it, and we'll see that some people responded to this situation with faith, and some responded without faith. And as we look at those two groups, we'll say, Lord, how are you calling us to respond with faith? So from what we read, we see that Peter is in prison, and the first example of a group of people responding in faith is this. We see that in response to this situation, the church was earnestly praying. That's the first thing we see this morning. Number one, the church was earnestly praying. Now, there's a lot going on in those 5 verses that Kathy read for us. We see that we see a lot of happening, whether that Herod was imprisoning people, putting people in prison, and killing some of the apostles of Jesus. And in response to all these bad things, the author, Luke, doesn't emphasize how bad Herod was. He doesn't talk about a history of all the people he had imprisoned. He doesn't emphasize and say, this is the worst thing, what are we going to do? But instead, in verse 5, he shows what was important. He says, Peter was put in prison, and as a result, the church planned a protest and held up signs. They said, this is not going to happen again. No, that's not what they did. It says Peter was kept in prison, so they gathered to raid Herod's palace and said, no, we're going to end this. They'll put no more people in prison, Herod. No. It says Peter was kept in prison, so they planned a jailbreak, and they were going to get Peter out of prison so he wouldn't die just like James. No. Instead, it says in verse 5, Peter was kept in prison, but the church was earnestly praying to God for him. There was a but there. Not like by the way, the church was also praying. It says, yes, Herod was a terrible, evil king. He was doing these things, but more importantly, perhaps, the church was earnestly praying. It's almost as though Luke believed the church was earnestly praying, so expect something to happen. This is going to make a difference. Not only was the church earnestly praying, but they were doing something that's hard in my genealogy for us to do, because in my parents' lives, sleep is very important. And they always say, that seems like the question Alicia says, your mom is always concerned you're not getting enough sleep. But this is what they were doing. They said they were not just praying earnestly, they were praying earnestly into the night when they were normally sleeping. We'll see in a minute here that at this time Peter was asleep. He was already sleeping, the guards were already sleeping, but the church was still praying. It was so important, they said, we need to keep praying through the night. Pray as long as you can. They responded to this crisis in faith, and how they responded was earnest prayer. Just keep praying. They weren't getting up at 7:30 in the morning or 6:30 like me with a nice recliner and a cup of coffee and let's just pray. They said, no, we need to pray even when we're tired and continue to pray because we believe it's going to make a difference. The church was earnestly praying. The second response we see is that Peter was sleeping, which we'll read about in just a moment. You might be saying, okay, David, how is sleep a faithful response? I don't know, but I'll take it. I'm going to try it out. I will be faithful to the Lord and sleep as much as I can. But this is why sleeping was a faithful response. Let me read to you Acts chapter 12, verse 6. It won't be on the screen. Let me just read it. Right after Peter's in prison, the church is praying. Luke says this, the night before Herod was to bring him to trial, Peter was sleeping between two soldiers, bound with two chains, and sentries stood guard at the entrance. So, Peter knows what's happened to his friend James. He knows what Herod can do. He knows that there's a trial coming in the morning, and that's probably not going to be a fair trial. It's not going to be this great justice system where he gets to declare his defense and they realize, oh, you don't really deserve death. He knows this. He knows what's happening, and yet he is sleeping. He's asleep. If it were me, I'd probably be tossing and turning or worried, or my mind is racing of what's going to happen. Lord, you got to do something. I really don't want to die tomorrow. Whether he believed that God was going to do what he did here and rescue him, or he believed it was going to be okay. Even if I die, it's worth it to follow Jesus. My death might continue to spread the gospel message. He had a peace and he continued to sleep. We'll find out later he was actually in deep sleep. He wasn't going to be waking up very easily. He was resting. He was sleeping. Sleep isn't always a response of faith. I'll let you know that. It's not always, well, I need more faith. Maybe I just need to sleep more, take a nap. Sometimes that is the case. It's not always the case. But here, Peter had faith. He responded to his crisis in prison, and he was sleeping. Thirdly, the third example we see here in Acts chapter 12 is that Rhoda was overjoyed. And you might say, well, Pastor David, you spelled Rhonda wrong. There's an N there. There's no N. It's Rhoda, and we haven't actually read about her yet. So if you don't know who Rhoda is, it's okay. It's probably one of those Bible quizzing things that you ask the child. You say, I don't remember who Rhoda is. Let me read for you just a minute. Read most of the rest of the story to figure out who is Rhoda and what kind of faith did she have. So, Peter's in prison. Peter was sleeping. Verse 7, this is what happens next. Suddenly an angel of the Lord appeared, and a light shone in the cell. He struck Peter on the side and woke him up. I don't know about you, but if I'm dying the next day and a bright light, an angel shows up, I'm going to be awake. Peter was sleeping so well, the angel had to hit him and say, well, you wake up. I'm trying to rescue you here. Wake up. He says, quick, get up. And the chains fell off Peter's wrists. Then the angel said to him, put on your clothes and sandals. I'm not sure why I didn't have any clothes on, but hey, we got to go outside. Put on your clothes. It'll be cold. Peter did so. Wrap your cloak around you and follow me, the angel told him. Peter followed him out of the prison, but he had no idea that what the angel was doing was really happening. He thought he was seeing a vision. They passed the first and second guards and came to the iron gate leading to the city. It opened for them by itself, and they went through it. When they had walked the length of one street, suddenly the angel left him. Then Peter came to himself and said, now I know without a doubt that the Lord has sent his angel and rescued me from Herod's clutches, and from everything the Jewish people were hoping would happen. When this had dawned on him, he went to the house of Mary, the mother of John, also called Mark, where many people had gathered and were praying. So he went to visit those people and said, hey, you can stop praying now, I made it. This is, by the way, the house of John Mark. He's the guy that wrote the book of Mark. Peter knocked at the door at the outer entrance, and a servant named Rhoda came to answer the door. This is where Rhoda comes in. When she recognized Peter's voice, she was so overjoyed, she ran back without opening it and exclaimed to everyone else in the house, Peter is at the door. That's Rhoda. Rhoda was a servant. She would be called kind of like a Nazarene, a forgotten person, a person that some needed, but you didn't really take much stock in what she said. She was a servant. She was a female. That usually put people a little farther back on the totem pole in those days. She didn't see a miracle. She didn't know that an angel had released Peter from prison. She didn't know that. She didn't even see Peter's face because Peter was knocking and she forgot to answer the door. She had so much faith that when she recognized Peter's voice, immediately she knew, God must have answered our prayers. Let me go tell everyone the news. She was so excited that she forgot to answer it and went to testify. If it were me, I wouldn't have quite done that. I would have thought to myself, this town's not that big. I wonder who else sounds like Peter. That sounds like Peter at the door. I would have gone to open it up and been curious, who sounds like Peter? But no, she was so excited, she couldn't help herself. She had to go tell somebody that God had done something, and she needed to go tell them about it because they had been praying. Rhoda, the lowly servant, the female servant, who's going to believe her? They would have asked, hey, did you see him? Oh, I didn't see him. I heard his voice. Oh, sure, you heard his voice. Okay. But immediately she knew what had happened. And that's the type of faith God invites us to have in Jesus. A faith in him that is so strong that when we've been praying and when we see God working, we recognize it because we've been looking for it. And we're so excited and say, hey, did you see what God just did? When King Herod was killing Christians and putting them in jail, the church responded by earnestly praying. Peter was sleeping. He had so much faith. And Rhoda, the servant, was overjoyed even before she saw the miracle because she just sensed it, heard Peter's voice. Those are three examples of faith in this passage. But there's also two examples of those who responded without faith. One of the examples is ironic because those who responded at the beginning of the passage in faith respond in the middle of the passage without faith. So let me give you two examples of those who responded without faith. Let me read for you before we get there. Acts chapter 12, let's start at verse 15. Right after Rhoda is so excited, she starts telling everyone in the house, Peter's at the door. God answered our prayers. This is how they responded to her. Verse 15. You were out of your mind, they told her. When she kept insisting that it was so, they said it must be his angel. But Peter kept on knocking. He's still at the door, by the way, still knocking. Hello, like I'm out of prison. Can someone let me in? They might find me. But Peter kept on knocking, and when they opened the door and saw him, they were astonished. Remember that word, astonished. Peter motioned with his hands for them to be quiet. Hey, I'm still a fugitive here. And he described how the Lord had brought him out of prison. Tell James and the other brothers and sisters about this, he said, and then he left for another place. They were astonished. They, the ones who had just been praying, the ones who were earnestly praying through the night, they were astonished. Now, I've said this probably half a dozen times in this sermon series, but it's important, so I'll say it again today. In the books of Luke and Acts, Luke wrote both of them. Luke, in the book Gospel of Luke, is about what Jesus did, how he lived, died, rose again. The book of Acts is the second volume, second part, that talks about after Jesus ascended into heaven, how the church continued. In both of those books, when you hear Luke write about someone who was amazed or astonished, that means they did not have faith. They were not responding in faith. A couple weeks ago, I gave you all sorts of examples in the book of Luke where Jesus would say something or do something and the people were astonished, or the religious leaders were amazed, but they actually didn't respond in that moment in faith. And that's what we hear here. We hear that those who have been praying in the night, John Mark, who would write the Gospel of Mark, and his mother and those there, they were astonished. They couldn't believe it, even after seeing with their own eyes and seeing him right there. Rhoda believed. She didn't even see him. She heard his voice and believed. And yet, the rest in the house who'd been praying, they didn't have the faith, even though they heard and saw, could even give him a hug. They did not believe. You see, those who had enough faith to stay up all night praying, they had enough faith to pray, but they didn't actually have enough faith to receive when God wanted to answer their prayers. They had the faith to pray and say, okay, I believe you can, but when God did, they said, there's no way God did that. There's no way. God doesn't do that, does he? They forgot that just a few chapters earlier, God had done that in Acts 5, when God released all of the apostles from prison, and yet they don't have faith. They had enough faith to pray, but not enough faith to receive what God wanted to give them, an answer to their prayers. That's the first response without faith. The second response isn't surprising. The second example we have is that Herod responded without faith. And let me read for you verses 18 and 19. This is the next morning after they're finding out that Peter's not there anymore. It takes them all night to figure it out. I'm sure the guards probably were sleeping too. It says, in the morning there was no small commotion among the soldiers as to what had become of Peter. They had 16 men in different shifts watching one guy, and they lost him. After Herod had a thorough search made for him and did not find him, he cross-examined the guards and ordered that they be executed. Then Herod went from Judea to Caesarea and stayed there. In chapter 5, if you remember, all the apostles are put in jail for declaring the resurrection of Jesus. In the middle of the night, an angel of the Lord releases them all, and the religious leaders come back and they can't find the apostles. Those religious leaders didn't respond by saying, wow, God must be blessing their testimony. This must be true when they repent. They don't do that. Instead, the religious leaders have all the apostles beaten and flogged and then threaten them and say, don't ever do this again. That's what Herod does. He doesn't respond in faith saying, wow, this testimony of Peter must be true. Jesus must truly be the Messiah, the Son of God. But instead, he can't kill Peter, so he kills whoever he can. He takes the guards who are in charge of Peter, and he executes them. Because no matter what God does, Herod still does not believe. It reminds me of Jesus' teaching in the book of Luke. I just have to find it now. In the book of Luke, Jesus, I think it's chapter 6, Jesus is telling a parable, and he, in that parable he says, even if someone rises from the dead, if they didn't listen to Moses and the prophets, they won't believe even if someone rises from the dead. Which is ironic because Jesus raised multiple people from the dead. He himself was raised from the dead, and in the end many said, well, just tell a lie, tell them the disciples stole the body. No matter what God did, they still did not believe. And Herod did not believe. In Acts chapter 12, God does something amazing. He releases someone from prison. Literally, an angel comes, opens the gates, walks him out of the prison. It's not the best case scenario. When you're praying for someone who's in prison, who's not supposed to be there, who's unjustly put there, that's not the first thing that comes to mind, but that's the best case scenario. They're out of prison now, right? God does that. 3 groups respond in faith. The church was earnestly praying through the night. Peter was sleeping. He had faith that God was in charge. He was going to be okay. And Rhoda was overjoyed before she had proof. She believed that God had done something. She was ready for God's answer. 2 did not believe. The ones who had been praying had enough faith to pray, but they didn't have enough faith to receive when God gave it to them. And Herod did not have faith. No matter what God did, Herod was not going to have faith. He responded by executing the guards instead. As most of you know or have experienced or have testified about, God has not completed his work yet in our world. He's still doing miracles. He's still doing things. He's still working to restore all of creation back to himself. He's still doing those works around us. The question is not whether God is still working or not. The question instead is, are we going to recognize when he is at work? And how are we going to respond when he is at work? Well, we chalk it all up to that was an amazing coincidence or luck or fate. In just a minute, we're going to have the opportunity to take communion together, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. But as you remember today what Christ has done, as communion instructs us to remember what Christ has done, I want to give you a couple questions to reflect on. I'll give you some time in a minute to reflect on these. But here are the two questions for today and this week to reflect on. The first is, do you recognize God working in and around you? And the second is, if so, how are you responding to God at work in or around you? Are you responding with faith, ready for when God answers, saying, I have the faith to pray, I also have the faith to accept and be ready when he gives and responds and answers? Or are we responding without faith, not prepared because the darkness of the world is so dark, or we've been praying for so long, or we just can't imagine how God's going to get us through this time? In just a minute, I'll give you some time to reflect on those. But as we prepare for communion this morning, most of the time we do communion in a very similar way. I or someone else bring you communion, and we partake together. This morning we're going to do it slightly different to emphasize a different part, different step. This morning I'll have the elements up here at this table, and in just a minute I'll invite you, as some quiet music is playing, to come up and take bread and take cup and to bring it back to your seat and just to sit there with it. Sometimes I emphasize in communion, we emphasize that God's grace comes to us, and we are right there, and God has everything we need. Today we're emphasizing that God provides everything we need, but he also asks us to have faith. Sometimes it's a step of faith. Literally, this morning you will feel the steps. In order to receive God's grace, he says, hey, receive it. Today the steps of faith will be coming, receiving communion, taking it back to your seat. After you take a bread and take a cup, you're welcome to come back and just to sit in your seat for a minute and just be in the presence of God. Reflect on these questions. As always, you're welcome not to receive communion today. If there's a reason you say, hey, I really have something against someone, I really am struggling in my faith, I really just believe I'm not supposed to take communion, feel free not to. You don't have to today. We do every month for good reason. But if you'd like to, in just a moment, I invite you to come to grab a cup, grab bread, and go back to your seat and just hold on to it. And then I'll help us all to take together in just a moment. So would you bow your heads with me for the